Hi everyone, and welcome back to Train Simulator. And the reason why I decided to record this video is simply because it's featuring a train that I actually quite enjoy, despite not really knowing too much about the real thing. This is of course the Lumo Class 803, and we are currently at York Station. Of course, in real life, Lumo services don't stop here, but for the purposes of this scenario I did decide to add to make it start with a passenger stop here at York. And of course, well, struggling to set this thing up. Right. When is the there's the self-test thing.
CWS and AWS operation.
Right, now I think we can open the doors. Yes, so today I'm just testing a scenario that I've made for on the I think it's called East Coast Mainline Northeast, and it's DP Simulation's modern image upgrade of the original like Kuju era York to Newcastle route. On this side of the station I've put another Class 170. I can't remember whether or not I had this standing in for a 195, although that would make sense. This is meant to be representing one of the Harrogate Loop line services. In fact, that 170 you saw moving off right at the start, that was on another, that was one going to Leeds via Knaresborough and Harrogate. Incidentally, speaking of Harrogate, you'll sometimes see LNER services there, although they use they have to use 800s on that service. Right away driver, it's a non-stop run to Newcastle, but please keep an eye out for yellow and red signals as we're following a TPE service from Liverpool. And we will indeed. Okay, I'm not sure how we could possibly be getting rain under the overall roof, but regardless, well, let's just get a move on. I forgot that first group had anything to do with Lumo, but there's their logo. Of course, I think, because the way Armstrong Powerhouse do these EPs or enhancement packs is that they'll put them online, and and they also supply like a branding patch, because as it's by default you don't get any branding like in the actual pack, because obviously presumably to do with licensing. But anyway, here's a couple of Class 185s as a complete aside. I should add that that's not the like MBU Studios / Alan Thompson Class 185, because I honestly think that's a bit too expensive for my liking. Anyway, of course, not long after passing York, or leaving York Station, we pass what I think is meant to be the National Railway Museum. And just for the heck of it, I've gone and put some locomotives I've gone and placed down some locomotives that are based at the NRM in real life. Although this one, I think, is displayed at Shildon, not York. The other four, well, 3 of them certainly are. Not sure about Tornado though. Anyway, there's the Deltic, and this is the very same one that the NRM has in real life. Speaking of which, we ought to get. I reckon there should be a new Deltic model in Train Simulator. Ideally done to the same standard as the Railwright Class 40, if anyone remembers that. And of course, over here, there's the Northeastern Railway 1001 class, or long boiler. It actually has the number of one of my favourite steam locomotive, that being New Zealand Railway's JA1275. Then of course there's the thing that the people building T1 number 5550 think they can try and beat. And this thing, one that had a face in a Railway Series book and double-headed with a blue E2 with the number 1. Wasn't expecting the frame rate to be as bad as that, but I hope I think it should improve as we get further away from York. Because I played Train Simulator long enough to know that the frame rates are partly to do with the amount of rolling stock you've placed in certain areas. And yeah, for the rest of the route there's not that much rolling stock I've put down. It's mostly just AI services with a couple of some static consists and some of the sidings. Right, so I can't remember what that 170 was doing, like the one that we saw leaving York in front of us, well, from like platform 8 I think it was. Actually, I've just remembered I've got some notes here to put in, like for what videos to put in the top right corner is like the little info cards. And the first one I've thought of is one for the Northeastern Railway long boiler. Now this is something I don't understand. Why would this signal be red? I would have thought that 170 is already gone. Oh, we're probably not going to stop in time anyway. Strange. I wonder if it's one of those... sometimes I've had issues like that where I've been testing some of my own scenarios, and sometimes the signal will stay red even though there's like all the signals in front. Wait a minute. Okay, there might have just been a glitch with the signal. I hope, and I hope there wasn't anything more serious than that. Unfortunately, I don't really know how to fix that, if I'm honest. I may know how to make a scenario in Train Simulator, but I don't really know how the route or how the game works in a technical sense. I've just realised I've been a right big brain, because all this time I've realised that I've forgotten to set the lights properly. Same setup as you get with the likes of the 801 and 802. I will be honest, like normally I don't buy a lot of like new Armstrong Powerhouse products these days, but well, mainly because I just don't think I'd have that much use for them, but I was willing to make an exception for this Hitachi IET pack. And actually, if I'm being honest, one of the most important reasons I got that pack in the first place was to get this Lumo train, because I've been actually quite fascinated with the real operation, despite not knowing too much about it. I do know that Lumo is a budget operator. It's like Grand Central. It's open access, or Hull Trains is also open access. And incidentally, Hull Trains also use Hitachi IETs, except theirs are Class 802s. And yeah, Lumo launched on, I think it was October 25, 2021, and they run very, very limited stop services over the full East Coast Mainline between London, King's Cross and Edinburgh. And another fascinating thing about this service is that it's just how few stations it stops at. Because it only stops, well, in real life it only stops at Stevenage, Newcastle and Bournemouth. Why they hardly have any stops on route is beyond me. And from what I remember hearing, Lumo's meant to be competing against like budget airlines, not necessarily LNER. Although I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people start travelling on, who have been travelling on this service just because it's so much cheaper than the likes of LNER. Although saying that, I honestly don't know like what the exact prices would be, let alone what they would equal in New Zealand dollars. I think I was watching, is it Rory McVeigh's documentaries, who was talking about HSTs and their history on the East Coast Mainline, and he was at one point when he was talking about like the Class 41 or prototype HST, he mentioned how this section of the East Coast Mainline between York and Darlington is apparently known as the racetrack because it's one of the flattest sections of the line. And indeed, we've easily broken the ton on this section, and soon fast approaching 125 miles an hour. Speaking of going at that sort of speed, and with the A4 Pacific that we saw earlier, I've just remembered that you can also get the York to Peterborough section of the East Coast Mainline in this game, except I haven't got that section yet, but I think if I ever do, I might try to record, well, or at the very least attempt to recreate Mallard's world record attempt, the world speed record attempt in 1938, which was on the section between Grantham and Peterborough, and the engine was rather famously going down Stoke Bank. Which reminds me, I don't think the East Coast Mainline has got like any famously long and steep inclines. Certainly not like the West Coast Mainline, which has Shap, or the climbs to Shap and Deltic, and those necessitated banking engines, especially for freight services. But I don't think the East Coast Mainline ever had, or ever ended up in any similar situation. Although from memory, the climb out of King's Cross is quite steep. Although saying that, the other day I did try making a scenario on the original ECML London to Peterborough route, and I had to give up on it because of just how outdated that route is, and just how different, or how much has changed with the rail, or with the track alignment since however long ago that route was released. I think it was like 2013 maybe. I mean, put it this way, the route includes the Class 365 in First Capital Connects colours, and the HST in unbranded East Coast livery. And there's one of the HST's replacements. That was either an 800 or 801. I'm pretty sure LNER used their 800s primarily on services from King's Cross to like Aberdeen and Inverness, where they can still run direct service despite the fact that not all of that route is electrified. Because I think the idea being that they can have the units run in electric mode when the wires are available. Because they used to use HSTs on that run, which of course are not electric. So using the 800s and running them in electric mode definitely would save a lot of diesel fuel. And indeed, electro diesels are quite versatile machines. Right, I'm pretty sure that we are getting close to Thirsk, although, I mean, I know Thirsk is the first station north of York, but I can't remember exactly how far along the line it is. What I do remember about Thirsk is that it was the scene of a nasty accident in 1967 when the English Electric DP2 locomotive was hauling a northbound express service and ended up ramming into the back of a derailed cement train that was going to Uddingston in Scotland. Unfortunately, unfortunately 7 people were killed, but technically DP2 was killed as well. Well, in a metaphorical sense, of course, because the locomotive was severely damaged, especially on the left-hand side, and she ended up being scrapped. I think only about a year after the accident. Although, of course, you can get if you're lucky, you can get models of DP2, and I do intend to make a video on the history of the real DP2 at some point. I've even had the script written out for ages, but I can't make it because I want to try and get footage of a model of DP2 running, but my track is absolutely filthy. I'm still waiting on a rail cleaner to come in as part of an order I got from Rails of Sheffield, which still hasn't turned up despite the fact that I've been waiting for it for over 2 weeks. Kind of says a lot about the sluggish postal service. Tell you what this section that we're currently speeding along reminds me of. When I used to play on the old East Coast Mainline London to Peterborough route quite a few years ago, and in particular the section between like Hitchin and Peterborough, although not all of that section is 4 tracks, but I remember that on that route the lines in the middle are the fast lines, and the outer ones are the slow lines, which is quite well thought out, if I'm honest. Something else I just thought to mention is that this Class 803, well not specifically this unit, but definitely another 803, did appear in a video I made a while ago. Well, I suppose you can say it was a while ago, it might have been before the new year. if memory serves, but either way it was a video in which I showcased an evolution of express trains in the East Coast Mainline, and like the sort of locomotives and coaches that we've seen throughout the years. And it went from like the evolution feature it started with the Great Northern Railway Stirling single plus some six-wheel coaches, and then ended with this. Also in there was like an A4 Pacific, what else? A Deltic, HST, Class 91, Mark IV coaches, and then the IET, or the LNER and Lumo IETs. And there's a pair of cross-country Class 220s. I forget where those two are going, but it'll either be Manchester, possibly. I don't know, well, it might be Plymouth, I'm not entirely sure. I must say, from what I've heard about the voyages, I don't think I would want to ride on them for a journey as long as like Newcastle to Plymouth. I mean, they're probably good for something like, I don't know, Newcastle to Birmingham, perhaps, or perhaps Bristol. I think cross-country services do go all the way to Penzance, but for all I know, they probably do still use voyages on those runs instead of HSTs. That's right. I've just remembered. I'll put a link in the top right corner to that East Coast Mainline evolution video I was just on about. Just making a note so that I don't forget to do so. This Thirsk seems to be a lot further away than I thought. Oh, there's the marker for it at the very least. I'm not entirely sure what services stop at Thirsk in real life. I'm pretty sure none of the like Lumo, well, certainly not Lumo, but I'm pretty excuse me. I'm pretty sure that none of the Lumo or LNER or TransPennine or Grand Central services stop at Thirsk. Actually, I wonder. I don't remember for certain, but I'm just thinking possibly the. I think Grand Central might actually stop here. I'm just thinking back to that DP2 video I was on about. One thing I'm going to try and do for that video is to get like when I get to the point where I'm talking about that accident, that crash in 1967, I'm going to try and include a shot of this, of like a Class 803 speeding past Thirsk. And out of personal preference, because I know that there are other options like if we're just talking IETs, other options would be like the TransPennine Class 802 or the Class 800s and 801s with LNER. Now, from what I understand, the IETs are actually quite controversial units, or at least that's what I've heard amongst videos but from Brits themselves. Of course, I've never been to England, let alone ridden on an IET, and from what I understand, apparently people have said that the seats are like they're called ironing board seats, or nicknames at least. I can tell that they're certainly hype. Well, if anyone who's actually been on a Class 803 in real life is watching, do these seats in Train Simulator look anything like the real thing? Like colour-wise, I think they're just about accurate, but I don't remember the moquette looking like this, at least comparing to video footage I've watched. I like that. I like this arcing on the pantograph. It's simple but effective, if you will. And the reason why I've set the weather to like foggy rain is actually to mirror the real life conditions I've seen in Tauranga today. This part of New Zealand in particular has been has gone for at least quite a few months with very dry weather and almost no rain, and then all of a sudden, basically 2/3 through March, we suddenly get a huge downpour. And so I thought, screw it, I might as well do that sort of thing in Train Simulator as well. Hello, there's the Class 802 running in electric mode. Of course, I'm pretty sure the 802s. I think a run on. I know that TransPennine Express use them on like Newcastle to Liverpool services, and they make use of the train's dual mode capability. But I don't remember exactly where on their route they switch from diesel to electric mode and vice versa. From memory, it's either York or Leeds. Although I don't know if electric trains can actually go from York to Leeds, like direct from York to Leeds under their own power, without having. Well, I suppose if you had to reverse if you just reversed at Doncaster, it wouldn't be going direct from York to Leeds. So, excuse me, I'm just having a drink of water. My throat's a bit dry. Right, that should do the trick. Now, when I was looking through the list of stations and what coordinates you can put in and teleport to in the scenario editor, I saw that there were only 7 stations on this whole section between Newcastle and York, which is surprising because I remember initially thinking there were a lot more than 7. Well, 7 stations in total. There's 5 between York and Newcastle. I think the one that we're approaching is, or the one that we're coming up on, I think is Northallerton. Actually, now that I think about it, I'll get a shot of the train speeding past the platform at 123 miles an hour. You definitely wouldn't want to be standing definitely wouldn't want to be standing on or past the yellow line when a train is going this fast past your station. Something else I've remembered about these. Oh, before I say this thing about the 803s, this line that's just branched off. Hello. It's a trio of Class 66s running light. This is based on a photograph I found on a real-life photograph, so it does make some sense. Now, what I was about to say was that this line that leaves the ECML at Northallerton, that goes through a place called Yarm. That's Y-A-R-M. And it joins the Tees Valley line at Eagles Cliff. And I think from Eagles Cliff you can go straight ahead up towards Hartlepool, or branch off to the right and go towards Middlesbrough. And indeed, TransPennine Express do run services from Redcar Central through Middlesbrough, and eventually they get to Manchester. In fact, those Class 185s that we saw coming in as we were leaving York, they were on a Redcar Central to Manchester Airport service. And speaking of the Tees Valley line, that is a route that's been recreated in Train Sim World 2, and partially in Train Simulator as well, because this ECML Northeast route from DP Simulations does add the Darlington to Middlesbrough section onto the original York to Newcastle route. Doesn't do the same for the line between Darlington and Bishop Auckland, because Just Trains have taken care of that, even though it's quite an old route they've made. I looked it up on their website, and you can still buy it, but it is very expensive for how short it is. Anyway, so yeah, there's the Tees Valley route in TSW2 is that is essentially a remake of this Darlington to Middlesbrough section, but unlike the Train Simulator version, it actually extends past Middlesbrough and all the way to Saltburn. One other curious thing about the Tees Valley route in TSW2 is that it's set in 1989. So it depicts Darlington Station as it looked before the East Coast Mainline was electrified, which I think is quite fascinating. Although I would have preferred it to be a modern era route, if I'm honest. That's not to say I've got a problem with British Rail era, because at least okay, I can't understand why there's a missing embankment. That's confusing sometimes. But as I was saying, wait, is it? How is there a missing embankment along here? Stupid. Okay, I'm a bit confused with that. missing embankments, although I think it might just be to do with how I've set the graphics, so I'm not sure. Anyway, what was I saying? Something about the Tees Valley route and TSW. Yeah, whilst I do prefer like to have modern era routes, it's also pretty interesting seeing how these areas looked back in the day, essentially. Because as I said, the Tees Valley route in TSW shows Darlington Station as it was before the East Coast Mainline was electrified all the way to Edinburgh, and it also shows a couple of stations on that line that are closed in real life. So like especially, well, the only one I can think of is Cargo Fleet, which is like the very small station on the I think eastern side of Middlesbrough, and another one that kind of threw me off was South Bank, although I think that station is still open, but it's just been moved to a different site. Okay, reduction to 115 miles an hour. And of course for motive power, I think Tees Valley includes the Class 37 in, I think it's like some rail freight triple grey livery. I forget exactly what specific sector it's for, but you also get the Class 08, which is the very famous 060 diesel shunter, and I think that's primarily used around Tees Yard. Then you also have the Class 101, which is a diesel, like a first generation diesel multiple unit that is used to run the passenger service over the route. And although that Tees Valley line is predominantly a freight route, I do generally prefer to do the passenger service on it instead. Christ, I don't like the look of this. I don't like the look of this curve. Like it's got, to me, it feels like we're going way too fast around it for a curve that doesn't appear to have any super elevation. Incidentally, I've just realised, or just noticed, how much or how far we've managed to go in a relatively short space of time. I suppose that's the benefit of being able to go faster than 100 miles an hour. And of course, looks like the speed limit's going back up to 125, so that means that we'll be able to go faster than 2 miles a minute again. And if memory serves, we're being routed through the platform, routed through one of the platforms at Darlington Station instead of going past on the down main. As indeed, when you see flashing signals like that, that usually means that it's usually pointing towards you branching off, referring to the. It lets the driver know that they'll soon be branching off the track that they're currently on and going onto a different one. And indeed, you can just see there on the heads-up display that the speed limit's going down to 35 miles an hour. Although I must admit, I do find it rather odd that. I mean, this is what I saw. This isn't something I've made up just for the scenario. It is something I saw on real-time trains, because it said that for this service, which is 1S95, so the 1218 King's Cross to Edinburgh, it shows that it will be routed through platform 4 at Darlington Station, or in Bruce Springsteen's case, Darlington County. It's technically one of two stations in Darlington, with the other one being North Road. But North Road is on the line to Bishop Auckland. And it's also that, from memory, I think what I heard, North Road is also the home of a small railway museum, where you can go and see engines like, well, the only two I can remember, I think, is either the original or a replica of the Stockton and Darlington Railway's locomotion, which was an 040 that was there on open day on the first day in 1825. And the Stockton-Darlington is, of course, the world's first public railway. Although some might say the Liverpool and Manchester has that honour, but the difference there is that Liverpool and Manchester is actually the world's first intercity railway, designed specifically to connect multiple cities. A job that it still does, of course. This, to me, this really just looks so bizarre, just driving through this, just driving past this station without stopping. I think it's just Northern and LNER services that stop here in real, well, no, TPE. Yeah, Northern, TransPennine Express and LNER that stop here in real life. I remember there is a depiction of Darlington Station on the Weardale and Teesdale route, and which is one that depicts the all these lines around Darlington, Bishop Auckland and other parts of County Durham as they were like in the 1950s, I think. Although diesels certainly still look right at home on this route. Well, on Weardale and Teesdale, of course. And it just shows, especially here in Darlington, you can, if you're on Weardale and Teesdale, you can really see just how much more extensive the railway sidings were back in the day. Right, now we can floor it again. Indeed, this single track non-electrified line that's curving off to the right, that's the route towards Bishop Auckland. And so out of all the lines, the masses of lines depicted on the Weardale and Teesdale route, the only section that is still running today as part of the National Rail network is that little section between Bishop Auckland and Darlington. That used to be double track. Of course, it used to be part of a much bigger network, but it's now, I think now it is just mostly down to single track, although I'm pretty sure there is a passing point or a crossing loop at Shildon, which from memory I think the railway station at Shildon is within walking distance of the National Railway Museum's locomotion site. So that'll be something I want to try and do if I can ever go to England in real life, is to get a train from London to Darlington and then change to one of the local northern services to go to Shildon, and then have a look around the NRM site there, and see things like the APTE, LNWR improved precedent class number 790 Hardwick, the Grizzly V2 number 4771 Green Arrow that we saw earlier, and what's another example? Well, the Great Northern Stirling Single, otherwise known as Emily, or rather the basis for Emily. And what's another example of an engine that's in Shildon? Well, it's not an engine, it's a unit. Class 142 Pacer, number 142001. And that's something I remember being pleasantly surprised about, to find that the National Railway Museum, of all people, got a Class 142 for preservation. Mind you, they are still quite significant in the UK's rail history, even though they are extremely controversial. Oh, the DP1, the Deltic prototype, that's another engine that is displayed in Shildon. And from memory, it's something else that I've featured on one of my previous videos. And if memory serves, it's a Class 66. With some mega freight wagons from the Class 92 pack. As I was saying before I was rudely interrupted by that 66, if I remember, I'll put a link in the top right corner to a video that I've done featuring the Deltic prototype, and I think that'll be the last of the little cards I'll be able to put in, because for whatever reason YouTube will only let you put in like 5 cards per video, which I suppose is fine if you can use it to the right, or use it as much as, well, use it to its full potential. Funny how, as we were going around that corner, the signal was double yellow, and then almost as soon as we appeared, well, just before we went over the AWS magnet, it changed to green. Indeed, just for the sake of a bit of a challenge, if you will, or to make the scenario a little bit more interesting than straight A to B run with green signals all the way, I did put in a TransPennine Express Class 802 in front of this Lumo service, because I think I saw in real life that, well, in the timetable, again, the one that I saw in real-time trains, I saw that this TPE service bound for Newcastle runs only about like 4 minutes ahead of this Lumo service. So even though it's obviously not meant to make any passenger stops between Stevenage and Newcastle, this thing obviously would still have to stop for any red signals. And indeed, the TPE service that we're following, that does stop. I think that is scheduled to stop at Durham and Chester Street before it gets to Newcastle. So one thing I've learnt over the years is that when you're going under cautionary signals, you want to try and slow down a bit. So what I mean is like travel significantly less than at the speed limit. And that is I think that's to try and hopefully avoid having to come to a complete stop. Because another thing I've learned is that when you're approaching a red signal, like what I usually try to do is to slow down to a crawl, like only about 2 or 3 miles an hour. Then, or the idea being that you can, or that you're still moving, so that you don't have to come to a complete stop before the signal changes. Although sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Indeed, I've certainly learnt that while playing World of Subways Volume 2 yesterday, or today, and Saturday as well. Of course, I have did put up a video about World of Subways 2, but of course I've used up all my info cards. So if memory serves, I'll try to put a link to it in the end card. I'll make a note of that. Signals are yellow, just as we've broken a ton. Now, from memory, I can't actually remember how much further Durham is, but I think we're supposed to go through Durham on the down main instead of diverging to go into the northbound platform. Just realised that me staying silent has meant that I can actually hear the noise of the windscreen wiper going back and forth. There's another double yellow. That'll mean that that usually means that the next signal. Oh, I think you meant to treat the next signal as like single yellow, unless you can see otherwise. And of course, with a red, that's something you do not go past at all unless you get special permission from train control, and even then that would be quite a rare thing. Alright, looks like there's double yellows again, so I think I'm going to take a gamble and accelerate to at least 85 miles an hour, I think. Considering that we're catching up to this Class 802, I don't think we'll be able to get up to 125 again, let alone 120. But see how things go. Incidentally, it started raining again in real life, and I don't know if you can hear I can't imagine the microphone will be able to pick up the sound of the rain, or as I would say, the sound of the overrated Dragon song. It's gone back to green. And just as another LNER unit comes along. Incidentally, I don't particularly like the brand name that the LNER 800s and 801s have got. I'm not, mainly because I'm just not entirely sure what Azuma is supposed to mean. Although I think it might be relating to, I think it is a Japanese word, but please do correct me if I'm wrong. And I think it relates to, in some ways it's fitting that they've got a Japanese sounding name as like their brand, because of course the Class 800, 801, 802 and 803 units were all built by Hitachi, which is of course a Japanese company. Indeed, I'm pretty sure Hitachi have built at least 7 locomotives for New Zealand. Not 7 different types, I mean 7 members of just one class with like 7 members. That being a variant of the New Zealand Railways TR, or shunt, or which is a generic designation for a family of very different designs of 040 diesel shunters. Like, so for Brits, like for essentially a British equivalent of a TR, I think would be like the Class 01 or the Class 06. I can't think of any other potential comparisons. The 040 Sentinels don't really count because they are I think to me they look a lot larger than, and probably more powerful than the likes of a TR. But no, I think in 1968 Hitachi did build a small number of TRs, which are distinctly different from the other designs, just like every other design. And at least three of the Hitachi TRs are still around, although I don't know. I think one of them was actually preserved or taken away from Auckland's Westfield Yard, but I don't remember exactly. But yeah, besides those TRs, I can't really think of any other locomotives in New Zealand that were built by Hitachi, if there were any. Just remembered that I think there were also some narrow gauge. No, it wasn't narrow gauge. It was some specialist electric locomotives built by Hitachi for a very unique line in Brazil, which features a very long and steep section with a rack and pinion system. So it's like Hitachi built electric locomotives that are designed to work on the rack rail. What's even more unique is that these engines have actually got side rods on their bogies, which to me looks a little unusual. But they're like centre cab. They're centre cab engines with the hoods at each end the same height as the cab, and I'm really not used to that sort of design from a centre cab engine, because usually the bonnets or hoods are much lower to provide the driver with good visibility in all directions, essentially. For like a British equivalent, well, a British centre cab, I think, well, the Class 17, I don't think there were any other British diesels with a centre cab design. At least none that come to mind. I suppose the no, I don't think the 060 variant of the Sentinel diesels would count, because that's still technically not. Oh, that cab is not dead centre, even though it might look like it. And the Class 14 certainly doesn't count. Anyway, might as well try to get back on subject for this video. And I seem to recall when I did that ECML evolution video, I was trying to get some screenshots of the 803 crossing like tall bridges like this one. I'll tell you what that one reminds me of, Dinting Viaduct in Woodley Line. And that's something else I'm going to try and put an end card to, or one of the video links to with the end card. Just writing a note down on some paper here. Class 56. Right, I did just see that single yellow, so that means that you have to drive assuming that the next signal will be red, and until you can see otherwise. As it stands now, I can't see the next signal because it looks like there's another curve. Actually, I probably should be slowing down just in case it is still red. Nope, it was red. I think we'll probably see that 802 once we get to Newcastle. And incidentally, I've just realised that, man, the distance, like this distance to go is like, it's, yeah, distance to destination. That's like ticking down faster than I'm thinking it is. Which is the same feeling I sort of get when I'm like driving a route where the average speed is like 60 miles an hour. So like the Settle and Carlisle line, for example. I think the average speed along that route is only 60 miles an hour. And I can hear the noise of another pair of cross-country voyages. That was a Class 220 coupled to a 221. And I could tell because the lead unit was only 4 cars and the second was 5 cars. Think of it. The Class 803 is also a 5-car unit. There's another tall bridge, although it's not as grand as the viaduct immediately south of Durham Station. Incidentally, I don't remember if I wonder if we're going on the avoiding line to try and overtake the 802, but let's check on the map, I suppose. What's the 802 doing? It's staying put. Oh. So it looks like the 802 is actually... It just looked like the points were set... Yeah, they're set against us. So that means that we'll be following the 802 the rest of the way to Newcastle. Right, I just hope that that once the 802 clears Durham, that we can at least maintain an average of 60 miles an hour, because I still want to try and get to Newcastle on time. Not Newcastle on Tyne, I said Newcastle on time. Although speaking of Newcastle, all this time I've been making this scenario, I've forgotten that Newcastle was where Mark Knopfler grew up. And of course, if you're any bit familiar with the band Dire Straits, then you'll know who Mark Knopfler is. He was, I believe he was born in Glasgow, but grew up in Newcastle. And I think that technically makes him a Geordie. And the signal is still red. I've lost count of the amount of times I've said words to the effect of, the signal is still red, whilst waiting for Kiwi Rail services in real life. And... how many silly things stop? And we just made it. Oh, just before the viaduct where Peppercorn A2, Blue Peter, blew his cylinders out. If anyone knows about what happened there in 1994. There's the distinctive motor noise. Seems a bit quiet for my liking. Nonetheless, I'd imagine there's no way Armstrong Powerhouse could have got a sound as crucial as the motor's inaccurate. Of course, there's this classic backdrop of Durham Cathedral, and I've lost I wonder how many... I'd hate to think how many individual photographs have been taken so over the years of trains crossing the viaduct with the cathedral in the background. Right, so there's that. It's curious how the layout of the station is quite strange, because you've got this main line avoiding the platform, but only in the northbound direction. And yeah, in some ways it kind of reminds me of Dunbar, which is another station much further up the line. I think it's definitely between Edinburgh and Newcastle, but I can't remember whether Dunbar is north or south of Berwick-upon-Tweed. But what I do remember is that station has got one platform, but the signals and crossovers are set up to allow the platform to be used in a bi-directional capacity instead of just one platform for one direction only. There was another 802. Because I think in some ways, I suppose you could say that Dunbar is set up, the platform is set up so that it works as if it were on a single track line. So if it was a station like Clonroost on the Conwy Valley line, which is that branch between Llandudno and Blaenau-Festiniog, although prior to the 90s, it continued on, or trains could go past Blaenau-Festiniog and onto Trawsfynydd. But before the 60s, I think the line continued even further past Trawsfynydd and to a place called Bala. these days, of course, Transport for Wales runs Class 150 DMUs on services between Llandudno and Blaenau Festiniog, where of course they connect with the legendary Festiniog Railway. It's interesting how at both ends of the Festiniog line, like obviously Blaenau Festiniog and Portmadoc, there are semi-direct connections with national rail services. Thank you, phone. That'll be an email or text notification, I think. And in this case, it's email. I mean, by the way, don't do what I'm doing, and don't try to play around on your phone while you're, or like look at things on your phone while driving a train, especially not in the real world. Because I think they'd probably have you. They'd probably hit. You'd probably. I don't know. They'd probably have you up before the railway equivalent of a magistrate. I don't know, but you'd certainly get in trouble, I reckon, if you did start trying to use your phone while driving a train. It's like how you're not supposed to use your phone while driving a car. The less I say about that issue, the better. I've seen that we're now 10 3/4 miles from Newcastle, and I think for the time being I'll just try to maintain this speed of 75 miles an hour, which incidentally is I believe it's the maximum permitted speed for freight trains in the UK. Indeed, like locomotives like the Class 66, and I think the 59 as well, they've got a top speed of 75 miles an hour. Although there is a variant of the 66 that is restricted to 65 miles an hour because of a higher tractive effort. Although I reckon for the sake of a cheap joke, they should have made the maximum speed 66 miles an hour. There's another single yellow. That's the point. This TPE service will also be stopping at, I said earlier, it'll be stopping at Chester Street. And from what I understand, I think TransPennine Express is the only operator along this section of the ECML whose trains actually stop at Chester Street. Because I think generally the LNER services don't, and certainly not Lumo. And that's something I remember about a lot of open access operators, or at least the three on the East Coast Mainline, so obviously Lumo, Grand Central and Hull trains. It's interesting. I find it interesting how there's barely any stations that they stop at. And so I think for Lumo, as I said earlier, it's just King's Cross, Stevenage, King's Cross, Stevenage, Newcastle, Morpeth and Edinburgh. And I think for Grand Central they don't stop anywhere until like York. And I think after that they just stop at possibly Thirsk. I know they stop at, I think it's like York, Eaglescliffe and possibly Hartlepool as well. Because I know that there is the Grand Central service to Sunderland, and what they also go to Bradford, don't they? Well, if anyone who's more knowledgeable on Grand Central is watching, please do comment below and let me know if they do run to Bradford. I should add, I'm not referring to Grand Central Station in New York. I'm referring to the to the English train operating company that has the same name. Hello, there's Chester Street Station. Quick nod to, if I'm getting his name right, Alex Dodds, who apparently is... Oh, yeah, Alex Dodds, I think he's another English railway YouTuber who apparently... He's certainly filmed quite a few videos at Chester Street, but I can't remember if he's based around this way. Although I suppose he would, I suppose he probably is. The only video I think I've watched of his, though, is... I think it was from like 2014, maybe, when him and a whole lot of other rail fans, they went down to Darlington and then took the once weekly service to Teesside Airport. And that's quite an enjoyable video, in all honesty. Of course, you can see Teesside Airport as it was 34 years ago. No, 33 years ago, on the Tees Valley route in TSW2. Of course, I dare say back then it would have had a more regular service. Because I think Teesside Airport would have opened in about 1971, and originally it was like it got an hourly service, but I think due to it being very poorly sited in relation to the airport, which is I think is now called Durham Tees Valley or something, it eventually deteriorated to the point where it just had that one service a week. But I don't know if that still runs. Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure that Darlington to Hartlepool service still runs, but I don't think it stops. I think they've actually suspended all service to Teesside Airport, but don't quote me on that. Right, that signal in the distance looks like it's another yellow one. Bring it up to 65 at least. Actually, no, for comedy's sake, for stupid comedy's sake, for immature comedy's sake, I'll take her up to 69. As opposed to, or I'll take her up to 69, or as some might say, rebuilt 56. There we go. Oh, just as the signal went to green as well. So right, there's no more stations between here or between Chester Street and Newcastle. So aside from the signals, it's pretty much a straightforward run. I seem to recall, I think it was Just Trains that did the Newcastle to Edinburgh section, or some other third-party developer. It certainly wasn't Dovetail, but I can't remember where you get the where you can get the Newcastle to Edinburgh section of the UCML. But I would probably only get it to just so you could do those unique northern services that go to Chat Hill, or like the ScotRail service from Edinburgh to North Berwick, for which I'd probably use just use the Class 380. Because the Class 385 isn't in Train Simulator. Incidentally, I've just realised that I think Lumo might be one of the few, if not the only, UK train operating company that has its entire motive power fleet, well, an entire fleet of motive power represented in Train Simulator. Because I think there's only like 5 Class 803s, and of course they're all in just one livery. Unless for all we know, Lumo might end up doing advertising liveries, but although, for the sake of, mainly because of how simple it is. Oh, Class 92, by the way. It's there in Tyne Yard. Whilst I don't particularly like this shade of blue, I do still like how the relative simplicity of this livery. Although another thing I find really odd is how on the logo they've nudged the letter O up slightly. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, if anything. One thing that really does kind of fascinate me about a lot of these modern, like really modern UK trains, like obviously the TransPennine Express 802s, these 803s, and like the London Overground 710s and Crossrail 345s, etc., is the fact that a lot of these newer trains in the UK don't have yellow ends anymore. And I think it's to do with newer regulations or something of that nature, saying that I think if they don't need yellow ends if the headlights are powerful enough to act on their own. Because I know that the reason why so many trains have yellow ends is to make them more visible from a distance, because yellow, I think, is one of the most visible colours. It's interesting how the majority of the Lumo front is blue, yet on the TransPennine 802s it's mostly black. The thing that kind of puzzles me is that you've got these TransPennine Express and Lumo IETs that don't have yellow ends, and yet the Great Western and LNER IETs do have them. I'm not entirely sure why that's the case, but I suppose for the sake of variety, it does make the units that much more interesting. Because whilst I do understand it, like why people would think the IETs are controversial units, like why they've certainly got some pretty disappointing aspects, at the very least there is a lot of standardisation at play, although in some cases it doesn't always work out, because I think in real life recently the Great Western and LNER units, at least, I think a lot of them had to be withdrawn or due to, I think, cracking, like frame cracking in the bogies or something, or whatever it was. It was definitely a very, very serious issue that took almost all the IETs out of service. And I think in Great Western's case they had to use Class 387s on, or they had to get, those units ended up having to go as far as Bristol Parkway, and I think they even hired in like some Gatwick Express and C2C 387s to obviously cover for the lack of IETs. As for the Heathrow Express 387s, I think they would have been confined to the... but I don't think they would have dared to take them off their own service, because I think from what I've seen of the Heathrow 387s, they're so heavily altered and like tailor-made for that specific Paddington to Heathrow service that you basically can't use them anywhere else. I suppose it's kind of like the old Class 460s that used to run the Gatwick Express. Of course, they've been brought to Train Simulator a few years ago by Master Key Simulations, and even though from what I gather the 460 is one of the best trains in the game, I still haven't got it because of the severely limited areas in which you can use the 460. Essentially, you can only really use it on the London to Brighton route. Okay, as much as I would like to, I don't think I'll get a screenshot there because that just looks weird when there's no reflection in the water. But of course this is the River Tyne. At least I'm pretty sure it's the River Tyne. And of course this very same river, I believe, was mentioned in the lyrics. Well, Mark Knopfler mentioned the River Tyne in the lyrics of the Dire Straits song Southbound Again, which is on their first album from 1978. Tell you what, this is a massive contrast to when we were speeding along at 125 miles an hour earlier, like mainly between York and Thirsk, I think. Alright, well now that we're finally approaching Newcastle, I think before we come to a stop, I think I'll just take the opportunity to thank you all very much for watching, and that I hope you've enjoyed looking back at the Lumo Class 803. So yeah, I've been wanting to make a scenario where you get to take the unit on a much longer run than the first one I tried, which was just Newcastle down to Darlington. Something a bit wrong there, that footbridge is too low. And there's the, at long last we can now see the 802 that's been in some ways holding us up for the most of this journey. We'll actually try to pull up with the front of our train, just parallel to the TPE one. Just try to go a bit further. That'll do. Right, and after what feels like just under, I think what was just under an hour, we have made it to Newcastle. I like how that, I just saw the there's the wiper of the AI train going back and forth. I like that little bit of detail. I don't really recall seeing it before, but yeah, it's now that well, so the scenario has passed its test, and before too long I'll be putting it on Alan Thompson's sim, so you can hopefully download it for yourself. So yes, so there's not really that much else I can think of to say right now, so yes, as I said earlier, thank you very much for watching, take care everyone, and I'll see you in my next video, whenever that'll be.